My name is Tim Storhoff. I'm the Director of Philanthropic Services at the Winston-Salem Symphony. I've also done a lot of research on the US-Cuban musical relationship. My book, Harmony and Normalization, US-Cuban Musical Diplomacy, was released this past fall from the University Press of Mississippi. So I was thrilled to find out about this amazing film, Los Hermanos, The Brothers, which is being presented as part of the 2021 RiverRun International Film Festival. I want to take a moment to thank all the sponsors. The film sponsors for Los Hermanos, The Brothers is K-Pasa Media. The marketing sponsor is the Winston-Salem Symphony, and the venue sponsor is Winston Factory Lofts. I'm thrilled to be here with the filmmakers, Ken Schneider and Marcia Jarmel. I just wanted to say the film is amazing. I can't wait for everyone to see it. And it captures this huge story about geopolitics and international relations while also being a really intimate family musical story. And it's all tied in there. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you got started on this story, how you came to know these two brothers.
Sure. First of all, Tim, congratulations on the publication of your book. I confess I haven't read it yet, but I look forward to it. It's a fascinating history.
Oh, thank you.
Marcia and I have been traveling to Cuba for about 10 years now. We have a family history. Our family history wove through Cuba in the mid 20th century. That's a whole other story and a whole other documentary. But while I was presenting a film at the Havana Film Festival, I attended opening night of the Havana Jazz Festival, which is really, it's a grade A music fest. And the opener that night was a young, wild-haired pianist who people were talking about was the next great thing. I got to meet him afterwards, and I'm a music aficionado, but I'd never heard or felt or experienced music like this before. So after the show, I introduced myself out in the gardens. We had drinks, we had food, and I really was very taken by him, his music, his story, his family, his whole vibe. And I came back from Cuba to San Francisco and said to Marcia, we've been talking about making a film in the art space, and I think I found it. And Marcia said, I described all of them. Marcia said, oh, great. What's the story?
And then we had the good fortune to meet Ilmar, the violinist who lives in the U.S. And at the end of a very lovely brunch, he said to us, Aldo's coming. He's going to tour my quartet for the first time. And we didn't know. And we looked at each other and thought, okay, there's a story. We don't know what's going to happen. Something's going to happen. And so we were filming like 6 weeks later. And the amazing thing is that moment could not have happened 6 months earlier. It really was about this moment when things opened up between the two countries because Obama changed the rules, not the embargo, it's still in place, but it was easier for people, for that kind of cultural exchange to happen.
So these policies and constantly changing policies, the film shows how they're having to deal with them to try to make music together. That's something that as filmmakers, you also would have had to deal with to some degree. Did that present any challenges for just getting this film made?
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting question. Both the Cubans we know and also ourselves, can't really hitch our cart to the wagon of a fickle U.S. policy. The embargo has been in place about 60 years, and the Obama loosening of restrictions was a 2-year cracked open of the door, which was then slammed shut with President Trump in 2017. So we can't decide whether or not to make our film based on that. That all said, in our many trips to Cuba, I've been there 15 times, Marcia about 10. We have traveled from the US to Cuba just about every which way but swimming. We've flown from San Francisco. We've flown from LA when restrictions were lifted. We've flown from Miami. I've been on a charter flight in New York, from New York to Havana direct. So however we're able to go, we do. However we're able to, get a visa legally out of the U.S. Treasury Department, which is there's a department there which oversees such things, we do it. But certainly it's been easier at some points than others, and it's been hard for Aldo, the Cuban brother, both who lives in Cuba, rather the Havana-based brother. It's been hard for him sometimes to come here, and that has affected our ability to film him, and getting him here for the recording with his brother did require an act of providence, and we did have to have some good fortune and some pluck to make that happen.
We have some luck in that we don't like many filmmakers from the U.S. who bring their own crews to Cuba and their own gear to Cuba, and that's way more complicated than we have a Cuban crew that we've developed wonderful collaborative relationship with over many projects now, and they have all the gear that we need. So and they know the city, they know how things happen there. We have a wonderful field producer who's local, so that I think really smooths a lot of the edges off of our work on the Cuba end.
Yeah, it was shot beautifully, just capturing the city, you know, Havana, and
they're a talented bunch.
Yeah, and then you also capture, you know, it becomes a cross-country story in the U.S. and, you know, it shows these parallels between the countries and everything. I was wondering sort of how, you know, the whole time they're in the U.S., I have this foreboding feeling as I'm watching it because I know it's not going to continue the way it is there, and you know, it's coming to be broken off. Was there ever a moment when you sort of thought, oh no, we're making this film, it's all done now, the story we were hoping to tell can't do it, or did you kind of know that there was still the story here, even though the restrictions kind of came back and cut things off?
I think it's all of the above. During the era when the 2 years of the last 2 years of the Obama presidency, Aldo was here in the U.S. nearly every month. He received commissions from symphonies. He toured with his brother Ilmar's string quartet. He had a couple of solo performances. So that was really, those were the wonder days, you know, for our filmmaking and for our relationship with them and for American audiences. And I had a chance to see them around the country, both at chamber orchestras and high schools. And that was a great time. Did we think it was going to end with a bang? Well, I don't know if you remember the context, but none of us really thought that that President Trump was going to win that election. We all thought it was the Democrats to win. And we imagined that we would be on the path towards full normalization. So no, the 2016 was a surprise and a disappointment vis-a-vis U.S.-Cuba relations. Did we ever think the project was going to be scuttled? You know, every film we've ever made, there's been that moment where we think, oh no, you know, if someone doesn't want to participate or a cinematographer, you know, got really sick, or that's part of the drama of these things. And this film had its share of that as well.
So I found that Cuban musicians are able to move between genres in some ways more so than, you know, anyone else I've really encountered between jazz and classical and popular music. And the film has a lot of this music in it. You said this was sort of your first art film, music film. Did that present any interesting new challenges or sort of opportunities for you capturing the music?
Well, it's part of the delight of making this film. It makes it a little hard to pigeonhole for music people.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't fit neatly into one category or the other. I think as an editor, Ken would say it presented some editing challenges because obviously musicians are very particular about how their music is presented. So we filmed some things that they weren't happy. Ilmar's quartet wasn't happy with the way they sounded that day, so we couldn't use that, even though we loved the footage. So there was some of that.
Yeah.
But nothing particular, I think, to the kind of music. Okay.
Well, it's another interesting question. So this really is a cross-genre type of music. Aldo and Ilmar consider themselves classical musicians, but the Cuban classical space is one that has strong influences from, you know, Afro-Caribbean rhythms, which entered from the east of the island and have found their way throughout Cuba, the inflections and syncopations of jazz, but it's really rooted in the Western canon. And their musical education, which starts in first grade when they're 6 or 7 years old and continues up to 12th grade, gives them the equivalent of, say, you know, a second or third year Juilliard student, all of course on the government's dime. So they're steeped in that Western canon, which is familiar to us. You know, we had more depth in that than in Cuban music when we began.
Mm-hmm.
We developed a little more chopped in Cuba music. But for example, one small challenge which you might appreciate is we were living in Havana. We were teaching at a university program there. And I asked Aldo to come into my editing room to help me make some music edits. And he was very accommodating because, you write a composition of 12 minutes long and the film, it's 90 seconds. So you really have to, you have to be flexible as a composer, what actually survives. But one thing he wouldn't allow me to do, for example, was to cut off the opening of this one beautiful, beautiful song. But the opening was too slow for cinema. It was like 8 bars of, 2 whole notes each or something. It wasn't going on. And I begged him. He said, no, you have to have the whole thing. So we had to kind of figure out an editing solution to that. So that kind of thing came up a lot.
Yeah.
One other thing I would say about that is I think because music plays this particular role in Cuban culture, I mean, it really it permeates everywhere. If you're in Cuba, you hear music everywhere. And so even though their training initially was classical, they were involved in all of these other rhythms and all this other music, and they played this other music, not popular music so much, but they certainly played jazz. And there's a wonderful story which did not make it into the film, sadly, that Ilmar, when he first came to the US, he'd been on scholarship his whole life because the government in Cuba supports arts education. And he's in LA, taking lessons and trying to figure out about how he's going to have a career in the US. And he realizes he has to make a living. And so he learns for the first time this certain style of Cuban music. So he can play with this band in LA that is kind of a popular band, but he didn't grow up playing that music. He had to learn it.
That's fascinating. Oh, yeah, the music is wonderful. I was surprised just how taken in I was with all the personalities. I was not expecting to laugh out loud at this. It's funny, it's poignant. It was great. And there were some interesting connections. There's the Chautauqua scene near the end. The principal flute for the Winston-Salem Symphony also plays with the Chautauqua Orchestra. So there's a split second where I could see one of our musicians on screen in there. So it was great. What have you heard from either of these musicians recently? Do you know what is coming up for them next?
Well, the lovely news is that Aldo just got a performance visa that will allow him to come again to the US.
Oh, wonderful.
Over the next few years. And they're starting a tour, hopefully this summer. That's going to run for the next, on and off over the next year and a half. And they will be playing together, and we are hoping that the film will have some opportunities to be connected to their performances, because I think it really enriches your experience of the music, knowing something about them personally, and probably vice versa. Oh,
I'm sure once people see this, if they're going to be on tour, they're going to want to see them live. I know I certainly want to see both of them again. So thank you so much for creating this film. We're excited to share it with everyone at RiverRun. It's just a wonderful, wonderful film. So thank you both so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim, and thanks to RiverRun. We're really excited to be part of the program.
We just wish we could be there. And I would just say that the film is going to open on May 14th in theaters around the country. It is going to be in Winston-Salem.
Oh, great.
And so if people love the film, maybe they could let their other people they know who might enjoy it also, that it's going to be around.
Perfect. I've already plugged it to all my world music students. So I will spread the word.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.